book on, was it Walking with the Entities?
Walking with
And
Magical
then,
Entities. Okay.
yes, and also Walking with the Elements of Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It's, yeah. And I'm probably 2, 3 chapters in on pop cultural stuff. So I'm enjoying the books and be listening to YouTube, Magical Experience,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is amazing. I love your work on energy work that you do. I've been listening to a lot of that. So do you want to explain more about your magical experience on your
Sure.
YouTube?
Sure. Well, so Matt, yeah, I am on YouTube under Magical Experiments. I also have a Substack, which is taylorellwood.substack.com, and that's where I'm also hosting a lot of the content that I do. And on there, what I do is I share kind of the cutting edge work that I and my beloved Sheena are involved in. Um, I've been for most of my journey, it's been kind of it's been a solo journey, but recently I've been starting to work with Sheena. And so we're doing a lot of work around inner alchemy. We're actually working on a book right now called Tower Time, which explores how to handle, tower moments, which I think we're all kind of going through a collective one right now in some ways.
Mhm.
But I do a lot of magical experimentation and innovation and spiritual practices, and that's what I share on my YouTube as well as in my books and on my Substack.
Wow, because I I've been reading your books for probably about 5 years. I'm a big reader, so, um, and, you have written so many books. It's oh gosh, I don't know how many, probably 20? I mean, you have been
I've actually written 53 books.
50, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
even more.
Most of them are in the magic and the occult. I have a few business books and some fiction books, and also a book on men's work as well. So yeah, and I'm as I said working on the latest book with Sheena. So that, yeah, always working on different projects.
Yeah, because you have written so many books, and like you said, not just spirituality, magic books. You have Asami books out too as well.
Hmm.
And how do you decide to write these books? Because you go from spirituality then to zombies and to pop and everything. It's just you just want to kind of jump around and be a diverse author because you really are diverse, and it's awesome. It really is.
Well, thank you. For me, a large part of it is just based on what calls to me at the time. Or what stands out to me. For example, like Tower Time, we're definitely working on that book because it feels really relevant to what people are experiencing in the moment. Um, with the fiction stuff, that was some stuff I wanted to do. I've written fiction a long time ago, but hadn't published it, so I wanted to actually take an opportunity to write some more fiction and publish all of it and see how it went.
Mhm.
And that was a fun little experiment and adventure. I'm probably not going to be writing fiction anytime soon again for a while, just because I have a lot of nonfiction books I want to work with, both some solo projects as well as some projects that I'm working on with Sheena. And I would say, though, at this point in time, in terms of what I pick and why and everything else, a large part of it is just based on what I feel like really calls to me as something that's relevant for people, what people need at the given time. It's really an important aspect to it. Like the next book we're going to work on after Tower Time is going to be a book on somatic sorcery, where we're exploring
Oh.
the body in further detail and working with it in relationship to the environment around you. So, and then I have another pop culture magic book that I'm going to be working on, and a couple of other projects. So hopefully we'll see at least a couple of those come out this year. I'm definitely planning on trying to get at least three to hopefully 4 books published this year. I already
Oh
got,
my gosh.
already got one published, Walking with Demonic Spirits. So two to three more to go. We'll see.
Yeah, I saw that you was that was coming out. 'Cause, your books are very interesting. I mean, not just the walking books, but you have, the alchemy books too, the inner alchemy, and, it's because when I first started reading your books years ago, I'm just like and then I kinda be keeping track of, what by some of my authors that I like to read, what they're doing, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, he's doing an alchemy book too," It's like, "Oh, then he's doing this book." So, yeah, it's just so interesting how you do, a lot of diversity. Um, for the audience, can you tell us about what would you call a magical entity?
Yeah, a magical entity would basically be a thought form that you've worked with or created, and you've assigned it a specific task that it can perform for you. It's a way to basically get a little bit of distance from something, or getting some help in a specific way. A good example would be an entity called Spedlimt that I created to help me be a safer driver, but also to spot police cars, fire trucks, ambulances, basically help me
Mm,
navigate the traffic and things like that. It was a case of making sure that I created an entity that I could work with that would be very helpful for me on the road, make sure that I stay focused, things along those lines. I've created a number of entities over the years, and the book Walking with Magical Entities definitely touches on and walks people through the process of creating and then working with an entity, in order to incorporate that kind of support in your life. One of the reasons why is because it can be really helpful to remove yourself from the direct equation. Sometimes you need a little bit of objective distance, or you
mhm.
need an entity that can perform a task that might be harder for you to do, but because it's doing it, it can kind of focus and take that on. And that's one of the reasons why it can be really helpful to create a magical entity.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, yes, on that. Um, with your elemental magic books,
Hmm.
um, now I think that elementals is like first to know or
Hmm.
above anything. Is that how you feel? Because I know you do have the elemental magic book. So do you think that people who is seeking the path, they should know about the elements above anything else first?
Well, I definitely think that elemental magic is a good place to start. It certainly was the place that I started when I got into magic, 32 years ago. So, when I started out with a combination of neo shamanic techniques and elemental hermeticism, and learned kind of the core elemental practices. And I think it was definitely helpful in terms of just establishing a good foundation for other magical work. And one of the things that I always like to say to people is you can't really experiment with magic until you have a good foundation in place. So I think it's that I would definitely recommend elemental magic as a good place to
Mhm.
start, in terms of just getting a solid grounding in how magic works and what you can do with it, and then building from there. There's a lot of good resources out there, including my book on elemental
Mhm.
magic, which is which is me basically sharing 30 years worth of work with elemental magic, and the different experiments over the years that I've practiced and explored with it.
I love it. I have that book too. So
Well,
I
thank you.
by the time when we keep talking, it's like, oh yeah, I got that book too. Oh yeah, I got that book too. So I got quite a few books. I'm a crazy book person, I guess.
Well, I get it. I've got a lot of books myself. You can kind of see it in the background there with the books that I have in my
Oh,
on my bookshelf. So I totally get that.
oh yeah. Well, I'm glad. Um, now I want to touch base, because see, we have a coven, and we had this coven for well, it's still going. I mean, it's over 30 years, and we have sister covens too as well.
Oh,
So how?
congratulations.
Well, thank you. So how we teach our covens and sister covens, we teach like a science part of the craft, and then the art and the magic.
Hmm.
Um, so we also like to make sure we cover, of course, the elements, yes, but the thought forms too, as well. Now we always try to do the thought forms. We What we try to call is like the science part of it, trying to get to empower yourself, get to ground, make sure you know how to ground, meditate really good, all that. Because for us, the way we see it is you have to learn all that before you continue on with the rest of the craft. Now, how do you feel about that? Because I really like to have your opinion on that, if we are doing correctly or not.
Well, here's what I'll say. I don't think that there's ever a wrong way or a right way to do something. There are many ways to do it.
Mhm.
And, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because a lot of times, you will read books and there will be kind of this prescriptive idea as to how you should go about practicing magic, or what you should do or not do. And,
Mhm.
I self-taught myself. So I read some books and I took the exercises out of those books and tried them. And then afterwards, what I ended up doing was starting to experiment a bit. And real early on, I had a couple people I worked with who tried to discourage that, because they were so sure that they knew,
Ooh,
you know. But
mhm.
fortunately, I didn't listen to them, and that's a good
That's
thing,
good.
because I think a lot of times, it's very easy for someone to say, well, this is the way to do it. So I mean, what I would share with you as far as that goes is, take a look at the results that you're getting, as far as what you're, with how you're choosing to approach that. And
Mhm.
if it feels like what you're doing is producing results that are in line with what you want to be learning and experiencing, then that's really
Mhm.
the only answer that you need to have.
Mm.
I think the most
Mhm.
important thing you can do is trust your own spiritual authority, which is one of the reasons why, like, someone who's written a fair number of books, and I say this a lot in my books, like question what you read. Doesn't matter who it is, and that includes me.
Mhm.
Be willing to make it your own, because just because I have a specific idea as to how something ought to be done doesn't mean that's right for everyone. It just means it's right for me. That's what works for me. And so
Mhm.
with what you're doing, I think that that's really the key question to explore and uncover, is like, is this producing the results that we want? Is this helpful to the coven members? Is this,
Mhm.
and ask that with an open mind, and ask your coven members and get their feedback. And if someone says, well, that doesn't quite work for me, you might ask them then, like,
Mhm.
well, what would work better for you? And it doesn't mean that you have to change your protocols for everyone. There are, again, sometimes there might be some people where it would be better if they approached it from an artistic approach first, or something else, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean you have to change it for everyone. It just means that you adapt it to the learning styles and experiences that those people bring. And at the same time, knowing what you already know, if you can kind of look back and say, hey, we've been doing this for 30 years and we've gotten consistent results, trust that. That's
Yeah.
really the most important thing that you could do.
Yeah. That's what we've been doing. I mean, we haven't had any bad feedback or anything. Always had great feedback though. Um, I just, I just feel like the to know yourself first is above most. Really important to know, because as building yourself into the craft, it's your own craft. You can do what you want with it. But I think to know yourself, to see if you're going to continue on through, is very important to do. Because, and I know you do have exercise in your chapters,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I was like, oh, exercise. I was doing the exercise and everything. And, I like it that you do that. because it's kind of like a self-testing yourself as well, and trying to get together with the book as one. You know what I'm saying? You know, and I mean that's really good. Is that something that you just thought up of doing, like self exercises in at the end of the chapters, or did somebody suggest it to you?
No, I come up with those exercises myself, and I've always incorporated that into my books because I felt like that's an important thing to do. Is that we want people to apply what they're reading about in a practical way. I mean,
Right.
it's you can read a book and have it up here, but if it's not down here, if it's not something that you're practically applying in a meaningful way, it's not going to necessarily mean the same thing. And
Right.
I've definitely been one of those people who's read a book and I got something from it, but I didn't really apply it in a way that was very practical. So it didn't, like, the theory made sense, but actually doing it is more meaningful. And that's why I like to incorporate exercises, because I want people to read the book,
Yeah.
but then stop along the way and actually do the exercises before hurrying to the next chapter or something else. Like it makes the work more meaningful and helpful, and that's really ideally the goal in terms of the magical work.
Yeah. And I like that. Because it just I to me, I have a little bit ADHD here, so, to me, it kinda makes me do the exercises and to make sure that I understand what I just read too, and that's very important because sometimes I can get unfocused real fast about something. I'm kinda like, "Oh, there's a deer going around," or something. So, yeah, I really do appreciate how your writing skills are because, there's not too many books that's actually like that, really, and, I mean, the books I have read, I don't you don't get exercises like that, so kudos to you for doing that because I think that's great, and,
Well, thank you
um
very much. I appreciate
Oh,
that.
well, you're welcome, and you say you was, more or less self-taught, and which is fine. I was kinda like in between, had a teacher and self-taught too. I always tell everybody, what we teach you, think of it as a lie. Go
Mm,
out and research it, to the truth behind it. So,
right.
um, I'm taking that you believe that too, as just go out and research the truth more as well.
I do. I mean, sometimes I'll have people contact me and they'll say, "Hey Taylor, I want to do X, Y, and Z, with this magical ritual. What do you think will happen?" And my answer is always go out and find out for yourself. Like, if you're not
Yeah.
sure, like, I mean, I could give you an idea, but I'm not doing that magic ritual. You
Yeah.
are. And I mean, I could do the magic ritual and tell you what happens, but that's not really helpful for you because that's still based on my experience.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of times, it's, yeah, there are certain commonalities to magic. There's a certain baseline and the foundation.
Mhm.
Um, one of the books that I've written, Process of Magic, for example, really explores how magic works and it gives you a pretty good idea of how a given technique works. But there's also something to be said for just the subjective experience. We have our own subjective experiences. My experience isn't going to be the same as yours. It's not going to be the same as someone else's. And trying to make it too uniform actually takes away the magic. A mentor of mine that in men's work, this saying applies to magic, and it's kind of ironic because he uses the word magic, but he says, have just enough structure for the magic to work, but not so much
Mhm.
structure that you take the magic away. And I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that, both when you're facilitating people or working with people,
Mhm.
and some of the capacities that I've been doing that work of late, or doing magical work. it's really important to be connected to that. And so, you know, what I always recommend to each person is go out there and make that magical work your own. And so, I mean, people can share, say like, hey, you know, I did X, Y, and Z. What do you think will happen? Or I want to do this. And my answer is always the same. It's go out and find out for yourself. Like I
Right.
don't know for sure what will happen. That's something you're going to have to go out there and do. And I could share some experiences, but I think it's better to put the authority back on them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I would like to see happen more often in you know, magic and occult and pagan circles, is where people actually, you know, empower other people to take on their own spiritual and temporal authority in life,
Mm-hmm.
because we need to have that kind of authority. And too often we live in a society that wants to strip that away from us. So I think anywhere where we can take it back and claim it for ourselves is absolutely essential.
Yes. We have a couple of comments from a fan. Drew is from Scotland. And she goes, yeah, I love the books that do that. She's talking about the books that has exercises. It helps you learn the teachings you read. Absolutely. And let me see. She also totally get that, Taylor. I got to read it out loud to learn it and to write it down. Also talking about the exercises too. That's one thing I like about that as well. Now, let me get Nick in here, and I know you have a few questions, Nick. Are you ready?
Mhm.
Okay.
So in your book, Magical Identity, you discuss the concepts of embodying magic rather than just performing it. Can you elaborate on that philosophy?
Sure. The way that I look at magical work now, especially compared to where I was, you know, I would say 10 or 15 years ago, is that when I talk about embodiment, I'm really talking about making magic be part of your identity,
Mm-hmm.
who you are, what you are. So it's not just about doing magic. Like anyone can go out there and do a ritual, and that can be a very performative activity. But the way that I like to look at magic is, how do I marry magic to my life, regardless of what I'm doing, so that I make it part of who I am. And a good example would be that today, I did a deep clean of my house. So I cleaned out the gutters outside, and then I worked on cleaning the surfaces and doing sweeping and mopping and vacuuming and all that other stuff. Now, most people are going to think, well, that doesn't sound very magical, but I would say that that is a very magical activity. It was about cleaning my home, cleaning out the stagnant energy that doesn't belong there. It's also about showing love and care for the spirits of the home and the spirits of the land. So when I look at magic as an embodiment, I'm asking myself, how do I embody the principles and values that I live by when it comes to my spiritual work and really my life? And a large part of it is learning to let go of the idea that we have to do magic in a performative way. So, you know, there's value in doing ritual. And I would say that most of my magical work, for the most part, is not ritualized anymore at this point. Like I do a lot of art, I do a lot of writing with magic. I incorporate a lot of it into just like what my daily and everyday activities are. And yes, there are occasions where I'll still light a candle. I'll still do some other things. And those are great for setting up a specific aesthetic. And at the end of the day, I found that I don't want to do that so much that I'm making the magic external to me. I want it to be something that is channeled and experienced through me. And that's a huge part of the way I approach it. So when I was cleaning my house today, I put a lot of care and work into that. And for me, that was as much about grounding myself as it was about grounding my house and really honoring my relationship with the house, but also my relationship with myself. It was an act of self-care, and that there's a lot of magic to that.
I love that. I have a very similar concepts in my practice. I'm a full practitioner, and that's one of my things when people ask me, well, how do you spiritual beings your house? And it's like, okay, here's my mop water recipe, and you're going to get down and scrub your floorboards.
Yeah, exactly. Because there you go, and then that kind of gives them a real experience of what it means to connect. Yeah, I mean, and I would say this too, that one of the things that I find sometimes somewhat problematic within spiritual traditions in general, not just magic/paganism, but is the tendency to separate out the spirit from the body.
Yep.
And when we divorce ourselves from our lived experience, because we're trying to focus on the spiritual, we're actually bypassing our lives. We're bypassing that embodiment. We're bypassing that ability to be fully present. And in a very real way, we're giving away a lot of our spiritual power because we're not allowing it to land in our bodies and in the world around us in a way that is really nourishing, and ultimately what brings a sense of safety and connection, because we're doing that.
Absolutely. Let's see. You answered that. Let's see. So you have the book on inner alchemy, and then in magical experiments, you also go into the inner alchemy series.
Mm-hmm.
How does that relate to personal transformation?
So for me, inner alchemy is really about it's a combination of energetic practices such as qigong, Reiki, but it's also about working through the stress and tension of the body. The things that we hold on to. Sometimes those are emotions. Sometimes those are thoughts. Those are other things that we're clinging on to. And then the other aspect of inner alchemy that is really important is the working with the body as a living entity in and of itself. So working with the neurotransmitters, the hormones, the bacteria of the body, and connecting with them in a really conscious way in order to create a conscious relationship with your overall body and that body consciousness. With the work that I do with inner alchemy, it's really about creating a very specific relationship with yourself and the way that you show up with yourself on the microcosm, like in relationship to yourself, so that you can show up in the world around you differently. When I'm taking good care of myself, when I'm making sure that I'm not, I'm not burning myself out, for example, but that I'm actually creating practices of rest and regeneration, things like that. That's going to help me show up better with the magical work I do. It's going to help me show up better in all the other areas. So when I look at inner alchemy, for me, inner alchemy is really a transformation of my relationship with myself and the way that transformation helps me connect to the world around me and to the people in my life in a meaningful way, because I've actually taken care of myself and nourished myself in the process.
I really like that a lot. I always tell people that a broken healer doesn't heal other people very well. They have to fix yourself first.
Yes.
Yeah, well, and I mean, here's an interesting thought too, like around healing. What if it's not really even about healing? What if it's instead about leaning into our edges and expanding our experience of what it means to be a person? And so instead of treating ourselves, as an example, as something that's broken, we could actually say that we're actually expanding into our experience as a human being and into the growth and potential of who and what we are. And that can include, of course, working through some trauma and stuff like that, but actually treating those aspects as something that isn't problematic, but instead is just something that we're welcoming home and receiving back into ourselves with love and curiosity and connection.
Really like that. Let's see. you do a lot on your platform, magical experiments. You built an entire community around experimental magic. Is there any key takeaways that you can share with us about that experience?
What I find is that a huge part of it is making sure that people are seen and heard and understood. We all want to be seen, heard, and understood. And when we can give that to each other, it helps. And what does that have to do with magical experiments? Well, a lot of times what people want to know is, can I share what it is that I'm working on? Or can I come and bring in like a challenge that I'm having and get some perspective? And again, a lot of times what I'll do is put it back on the person, because more often than not, that person has the answers they need. But I do it in a way where I'm asking questions and I'm curious and I love to discover what's going on with them, because that helps them make their magical work their own. And really, that's a huge part of what magical experimentation is about. It's learning to make the work that you do your own, and being able to share that with other people in an encouraging environment, as opposed to one where somebody's going to come along and say, well, that's not real magic, or you don't know what you're doing, or you're reinventing the wheel. Yes. All of which I've heard before in the past, and all of which, is really just people trying to be elitist because they don't actually in and of themselves really know what they're doing, but they feel like they have to cling on to something instead of being open to discovery and learning and being curious and being curious about the way the world works and discovering that. Like there's, and I won't pretend that I have all the answers, because I certainly don't. And nobody else does either, but we can learn a lot. We can ask questions, we can get curious and discover. And that's a huge part of what underlies the magical experiments community, both on Facebook and on Substack, which is where most of our activities happening these days.
How do you envision the future of magical practices as we evolve through the digital age?
Well, I mean, I think there's always going to be a place for, what the history and what's come before. And I think it's important to have that in place. We have to know where we've been in order to know where we go. I do think it's important to also continue to explore the intersection of magic with non-occult disciplines. So one of the things that I like to do, for example, is, integrate different disciplines such as pop culture studies, literacy theory, physics, neuroscience, things along those lines, and integrate those into my magical practice. One of the things that I've been doing a bit now is I've been exploring, for example, the intersection of AI and magic. And not necessarily coming up with rituals like some people are with AI, but more like exploring the idea of like how AI can be worked with as an entity of sorts, and what it means to work with AI, and how to work with AI as a source of divination, and incorporate that aspect of like the knowledge that it has access to. How can we take that and turn it into divination? And I know some people are on the fence about AI or have their own strong opinions about it, and I get it. And I'll admit I was skeptical about AI for a bit, but I think that, as with anything else, we can either choose to embrace what's available to us, or we can shut it down. And I mean, there's good reason. There are some good legitimate reasons that people are skeptical about AI. Like, I get it. Like, if you're an artist and you've had your art input into AI, and then like somebody is basically then creating your art using AI, I mean, I would feel the same way. I'd feel the same way with like my writing and things like that. So I totally get it. And at the same time, I think that there are ways to use that and explore AI without necessarily plagiarizing or stealing from other people. And that's what I would encourage people to do. the other thing that I would say, like in terms of just in general, like there's the digital, but then there's also the importance of embodiment practices. As an example, like one of the reasons I've gotten into a lot of somatic and embodiment practices is as a response to the digital world, kind of the need to get away from the screen and actually connect with the world around us in a meaningful and powerful way. So I think that that's another element of magical work that also needs to be explored and embraced. And it does, we don't need to get so lost in the digital ethers that we don't participate in the world around us, because there's a lot to participate in the world around us. And if we just keep ourselves always focused on like the digital, we're losing out on something significant to our lived experience. So there's a balance there.
Yes.
And I think
yes.
that's a huge aspect that needs to be considered and worked with and explored, and certainly is something that I'll be continuing to explore in my writing and books.
I look forward to seeing that. There's a whole lot, and I definitely agree with you that there's a fine balance between exploring nature and the elements, or bringing that into you if you don't have access to going outside, whether you're a spoony witch or um, you live in a huge metropolitan and there's just not a lot of nature.
Mm-hmm.
Bring it in. But there's an intersectionality, because with us being post-COVID, a lot of witch communities went online, and I don't think that that'll change for some of it. Uh, I think that a lot of people are very comfortable with things being online, and we're slowly getting back to in-person events and things like that, which I'm super happy about. But that I think that we're kind of in uncharted territories, but also that definitely unplugging for periods of time is really helpful to connect back into nature and with yourself and really slow down.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is important. What I found is that the more I integrate a time to slow down and really allow myself to receive in the world, the more powerful the magical work is that I do.
Oh, I
That's
agree.
a theme that I've been exploring a lot more of in the last few years in particular, is like you don't necessarily need to do magic all the time. It can be good to have a daily practice and like a commitment along those lines, just for sharpening your skills and taking care of yourself and things like that. But there's also something to be said for doing some magic for a period of time and then just letting it land and receiving it and allowing it to play out. And the more we can do that, the more I think that we actually can get meaningful results that truly transform our lives, as opposed to kind of being stuck in a continual cycle of trying to do something and maybe not necessarily getting where we want to go. And so that's also something that I hope to see more show up more in conversation with, and the writings and things that people put out there, because we do live in a very busy world, but that doesn't mean we have to be busy ourselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what are the new projects you're working on? I know everybody's kind of like busy this time of year, going to events and book signing for new books. So what's on your agenda?
Well, I just got done with a Radiant Wellness Metaphysical Fair on Saturday, which was yesterday, and that was fun. But really, I'm going to be staffing at a men's weekend next week, helping men, transform their lives and touch a piece of their shadow so they can come out the other side, more in touch with themselves. And then after that, I'm going to be going to a training for shadow work facilitation. So doing that, and then I'm visiting my beloved for a couple weeks up in Canada. So that's kind of what's going on. I'm not necessarily doing a lot of conventions and shows anymore. I do a lot more of my work online, as far as connecting with my community, teaching classes and things along those lines. I do the occasional event, but for the most part, I'm busy writing books and also just doing a lot of work in the men's workspace as well, because that's a community that I've really felt called to work with and serve, especially because there are a lot of men out there that really need that work.
Yeah.
So, and I'll still be, of course, continuing to practice magic and experiment with it and share the work that I'm doing. And I feel really fortunate that my beloved and I are doing this together. That's something I've always long dreamed for and not really found in the past. So it's it's a novel experience to have that now, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes.
Yeah. And I know you did a book, masculinity, book, mature.
The quest for mature masculinity. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's really interesting too, because you don't have very many authors that actually do books about men, and I know we have had a few podcasts of like men talk in the witchcraft community. We have Ian Corrigan came on one time, and Mike Nichols that would come in, and they would have a talk with Nico and my husband or some of our friends. So, that's really important, because my husband, I know he always felt like he was left out, because everybody, even our coven, we had like mostly women, just a few men. So he kind of felt left out. And then when he saw these masculinity books come out, he's like, oh my God, thank you for, because it's really important too for the male to get in touch with, the female side as well as the masculinity side and everything. So thank you for that book, because I know that's one of the books that my husband has.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that he's found that helpful. Yeah, I mean, it is really important. I mean, one of the things that I think is significant is that there are a lot of men out there in general who are definitely needing to do some of the work.
Yes.
And that's not a judgment on them. I've been that man myself in the past, and I think it's important to recognize that and to honor the opportunities for growth and transformation and change that can occur. I feel fortunate enough that I've been able to work with a few different organizations, such as Mankind Project and Sacred Sons, who are helping to bring that work into the world. And of course, just doing some of that work on my own as well. And there's definitely a need for it, both in the spiritual, pagan occult spiritual community, and just in the world at large for men. So, and my hope is really that the work that I put out there and some of the other work that's available, that helps men find a healthy version of masculinity that is mature and empowered and sovereign in a way that is also honors the feminine and creates, hopefully creates a day where we don't need to do such a thing as men's work, because we've been able to kind of unpack and leave the toxic patterns behind for something better.
Yes, that's true. Very, very true. Yeah, because when I was looking through my books, I'm just like, oh hey, how about this guy here, which was you, and I'm like, yeah, we need him on the podcast, because he has some cool stuff. And a lot of books. I mean, how long does it take you to do a book?
Usually a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, I would say, in terms of writing. But keep in mind too that I've usually done a lot of research and experimentation and work ahead of time. I mean, one of the, I sometimes get people who are like, wow, it seems like you're popping a book out, like, really quickly. And it's like, well, not really. I mean, a lot of this is stuff that I've worked on for a long time, and it's just finally become the time to put that out there into the world. So, it's that's kind of the way that I look at it. And I mean, there's a lot I want to share. So I'm not really going to just publish one book a year like some people do. And I mean, nothing wrong with that. That's what they're doing. But in my case, I usually have I've had a lot of projects and things that I've worked on over the years that are still waiting to be, brought into manifestation. And that's one of the ways of doing it, is through the books.
Well, keep it up, because your books, I mean, they really are great. They're good. They're good to teach yourself, to show others about your books and everything. I have learned from your books. My husband has learned from your books. So yeah, you're doing good work. Keep it up.
Thank you.
So how did you got it into your path? You just are you like a natural witch and just kind of went for it, or did somebody help you? Or
Well, I mean, I got into magic because, I mean, I always had a bit of an interest and curiosity from it when I was a little kid. But I started practicing magic when I was 16. I was a born again Christian at the time, and but I found the idea of only reading one book and that book having all the answers to be really problematic. And an acquaintance that I knew sat me down one day. I was in the library and I was reading a fantasy book. He sat down with me and he started telling me an experience that he had had with astral projection and encountering a spirit. And I asked him to tell me more about it. And at that point, he brought some books in the next day, and I started reading those and discovering that it was possible that magic was real, was really powerful experience. And shortly after that, I stopped being a born again Christian because I realized that I wanted to spend my life practicing magic and getting my questions answered. So, I think if anything, I think I just have a huge amount of curiosity, and I love learning, and I love incorporating what I learn into my spiritual practice. And that's really at the heart of what I do and why I do what I do.
That's great. That's really awesome. If you could have dinner with somebody that is deceased, who would you have dinner with?
Oh, that's an interesting question. If I could have dinner with anybody at all, I would probably try to have dinner with Nikola Tesla. It would be really interesting to have a conversation with him and kind of learn some of his thoughts and ideas and the way that because he seemed to have a really unique way of looking at the world in terms of things. And I like connecting with people who have unique ways of looking at the world.
Wow. Great. Yeah. I would agree. Didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I thought it was just like, fun question to ask at times.
Oh, yeah.
But you have so many books, and I mean, we can go on and on because, I mean, you are so, how can I say it, beyond years intelligent. I mean, you are. I mean, I know when I saw the pop culture book, and I'm like, Taylor with this book, and I was like, oh, this is very interesting, But after I started reading it, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Can you explain a little bit about that book in your own words?
That was my first solo book. I wrote it because I had started practicing pop culture magic in the late 1990s, mid to late 1990s. I would watch, some TV shows or read some books, and I would ask myself if there was a possible way to turn some of what I saw or read into a magical technique, or if it was a way to connect with the spirits and or the pop culture characters as spirits. And so I started to come up with some different practices and explorations around that, using what I knew at the time to help me structure and create the pop culture magic workings. And what I found is that with pop culture, that or with magic rather, that you can swap out a lot of the what I'll call the aesthetics, the things that aren't absolutely essential. You can swap a lot of that out with different things and still have a magical working that's sound and workable. as long as you have a solid foundation in place. And so that's what Pop Culture Magic and the other two books, Pop Culture Magic 2.0 and Pop Culture Magic Systems, explores, is how to create viable systems and viable pop culture magical practices and get meaningful results, as well as doing that with the pop culture that you love. I'm really proud of that book. It's a book that I've had some people share with me at different times, that they hadn't felt like what they were doing was real magic, or they'd been told it wasn't, and then they read that book and it told them that, like, oh, hey, there is that what I'm doing here actually is meaningful and purposeful for me, and I don't have to necessarily let what someone else tells me dictate what my magical practice is. And I think that's really important, because a lot of times we do get told by people that might be well-meaning or maybe not, as what they think magic is or isn't. And again, each person's path is their own. So I think that pop culture magic is a viable way to go about doing that. And that's a bit about that book and that series and what it is.
That's pretty awesome. So one last question: your new book.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell the audience what that book is all about?
Sure. My newest book is Walking with Daemonic Spirits, and it is a book about working with spirits of wisdom. So I'm referring to the root word of daemon, Daemon. We, of course, a lot of times when people hear that word, they might think of demons or demonic magic, and it is kind of based around that, but it is the idea of working with spirits of wisdom and creating collaborative, respectful relationships with them. I walk people through my particular system for doing that and how you can work with those spirits. It's a really wonderful book. I'm very happy to have it out there. And if you're looking for an alternative approach to how to work with demonic spirits in a way that's respectful and actually very transformative, I highly recommend getting that book and checking it out. It's available on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, and other sites. And also, you can also order it direct from me.
Wow, that's cool. I might have to order that book. Amongst put on my list. I got a large list, but I love to read. Well, I just want to say thank you, Taylor, for coming on. Very interesting. You have done such great books, really. And I'm looking forward to the new book. And I wish you the best with Sheena.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'll be waiting for that book too when you guys get done with it. So, but I just want to say thank you very much for coming on. Many blessings to you. Just hold on for a couple of minutes while we tell everybody to subscribe, share, and like. And we see you on the next episode of Within the Cauldron, where mysteries and secrets lies within. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And blessed be.
Great Goddess, I am so thankful to have you guiding me, protecting me. I am so thankful to have you guiding me, protecting me. I am Great Goddess, I am so thankful to